Shalom, everybody. Welcome to this week's journey through Torah. This week we're in Parsha Vayelech, and he went. We're in Deuteronomy 31. Just a few more portions left to finish out this book. We have 31, chapter 32, Ha'azenu, and then we're finishing out the Torah with 33 and 34. So only three more, counting this one left. So we've got some good stuff to get into. We're coming to the close of it. We're rounding out, and as we're doing that, we're kind of summing what is the important things to remember as we go forward. Now, that's some of the things we see. We know that this entire book, Devarim, Deuteronomy, Moshe is telling the people, this is the next generation, telling them the things they need to know as they go into the land. Not just a history lesson, but yes, where they came from, how they got here, the promises that Yahweh has given to them, where they are going and why, who they are, who he is, and also bringing them into a land that says flowing with milk and honey, a land that Yahweh said he has covenant with. And when you get into the land, life is going to be different. So when you get into the land, you're not going to be in one central camp anymore. You're not going to be able to see the tabernacle, the Mishkan, right in the center of the camp. You're not going to be near all your neighbors here like you are now, the entire nation of Israel, where you could walk the midst of the camp in a day. Not going to happen like that. When you go into the land, you're going to be divided in the land, and you're going to be spread out. You're not going to be able to see the presence of Yahweh in the camp. Life is going to change drastically. So there are some things we see in this Parsha that gives us reminders to come back together as a people of Yahweh, to be reminded of who we are, not just as individuals, but as a nation, as community. And why that's important. And when we gather in together, where is our focus? Is our focus just on what I want and what's important to me? Or is our focus on Yahweh and our focus on what is the best things to happen for the people of Yahweh? So there's a lot of things that we need to cover in this week's Parsha. Okay, so let's start off with reading Deuteronomy 31. We're going to go to verses 9 through 13. And it says, Moshe wrote down this Torah and gave it to the Kohanim, the sons of Levi, who carry the ark of the covenant of Adonai, and to all the elders of Israel. And Moshe commanded them, saying, at the end of every 7 years, in the set time of the year of canceling debts during the feast of Sukkot, when all Israel comes to appear before Adonai your God in the place he chooses, you are to read this Torah before them in their hearing. Gather the people, the men, the women, the little ones, and the outsider within your town gates, so that they may hear, and so that they will learn, and they will fear Adonai your God, and take care to do all the words of this Torah. So their children who have not known will hear and learn to fear Adonai your God all the days you live on the land where you are about to cross over into the Jordan to possess it. So there really is a lot going on in just these few verses. We can really break down a lot of different scenarios, and he's talking to different groupings of people. But one of the important things that we see here is the importance of teaching it to the children. Like I said, they're going to be scattered throughout the land. So it's not like they're going to have Moshe at their disposal. He didn't even cross over. What about Joshua? He's not going to be able to see them every day and for them to be able to go to him to talk to what's going on. What about the priest? He's not going to be there. The high priest, he's not going to be able to access everybody. What about the Torah? Okay, they had one Torah. How fast can they write the copies? I don't know. So they normally take a year to write a Torah for one person. But again, who's going to handle it? Who's going to get it where it needs to go? There were Levi'im scattered throughout Israel, and there were Levi'im cities throughout the land. But it's not like every person had a copy of the scriptures. Okay, it's not like we have now that we take for granted that we have a Bible available to us wherever we're at, especially now on our phones, right? So what are the instructions we need to have here? Well, first off, we need to be mindful in our everyday life of what Yahweh has told us to do, because remember, so much of the Torah is about relationship, not just with Yahweh, but with one another. Well, how do we know how to interact with one another if we don't know what Yahweh says? So in this Parsha, we have a good answer for that. Okay, so first things first, you have to be taught. You have to learn it. And as you learn it, it's not just for you to keep to yourself. As you learn it, you are to be actively involved in your family and talking about the word and teaching the word to your children, because if you don't teach it to your children, who are they going to get it from? How are they going to get life lessons and how they're supposed to live? They're going to get it from somebody else. And you don't know what that somebody else thinks or believes. So you have to teach it to your children. You have to not just sit down and talk to them about it, but you have to demonstrate it in your life so that they get it. They'll get the demonstration more so than they will get the talking to. See, that's a lot of times as we try to teach our children, it's a lecture, talking to them, and they're not really listening. But if we get them involved in the word, then they're listening and they're paying attention to it, and they're learning how to walk it out and to live it, right? And we do that together. Matter of fact, we see that in the Shema, Deuteronomy 6, right? Deuteronomy 6 verses 6 and 7 says, "These words which I am commanding you today are to be on your heart." See, you get it, you write it on your heart, and you are to teach them diligently to your children. You are to speak of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. We see that again in Deuteronomy 11, 18, and 19. The second part of the Shema was, remember, Deuteronomy 6, Deuteronomy 11, and last part of Numbers 15. Deuteronomy 11, 18, and 19 says, "Therefore, you are to set these words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and you are to bind them as a sign on your hand and as frontlets between your eyes, and you are to teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up." It is important that you teach it to your children. They get the concepts, guys. They may not get all the intricacies of it, but they get the concepts. And a lot of times, if you have children, you know that they're listening when you think they're not. And sometimes that works against you, right? But they're listening. They are paying attention. Just what are they learning when they're paying attention to what we're doing, right? Which we see this as well. Yeshua reiterating, you need to teach it to your children, and you need to approach him as a child. Matthew 19, 13 to 15 says, little children were brought to Yeshua so that he might lay hands on them and pray, and the disciples rebuked those who brought them. But Yeshua said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." And after laying his hands upon them, he went on from there. Guys, we need to teach it to the children. And I get and I understand being able to talk to children on their level, but I also feel that it's important for children to worship together with their families. That's why at Ruach, we worship together as the family, and we have ministries for children, but we don't do that every week, because I think it's important for the children to, again, worship with the families and to learn with the families and to experience things as a family, right? And so we're all learning together. And guys, the kids have some wisdom that we need to hear sometimes, because they have, you've heard childlike faith. There's a reason why we say that. So sometimes we need reminders of these things. And so we need to teach it to the children. The children are not brushed aside like they don't matter. They matter, okay? And I would much rather have children around and have some child noises than to have no children around at all whatsoever. See, so we need to be able to teach it to the children. We need to be able to show them what is important, not just to try to tell them what's important, to show them what is important and to have an example of what is important, which is why it's important that we worship together, that we have community together, and that we read our scriptures at home, and that our children see us doing these things. Matthew 18, 1 through 4, it says, "At that hour the disciples came to Yeshua saying, 'Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?'" Boy, we're just like that, aren't we? Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Does it matter? That's still that pride within us, isn't it? We can't just be involved in being there. No, we've got to be the best, right? It's not about being the best. It's about giving him your heart and letting him work through you and through your life. As you've dedicated your life to him, he's going to do the things of his kingdom through you. And you don't get the glory for it anyway. So what does it matter who is the greatest in the kingdom? He is the greatest in the kingdom. Okay, so that's it. Problem solved. We serve him. Right. But anyway, this is what they did, and it just kind of shows us as well. And it's one thing I love about the scripture. It's real, and it shows us people as they really were. So they come and they say, "Who's the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" And he called a child to himself, and he set him in the midst of them. And he says, "Amen, I tell you, unless you turn and become like children, you shall never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever then shall humble himself like this child, this one is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." So he says they have to humble themselves like a child and come to him. We cannot come to him and say, "I've been around the block a time or two, and I know what I'm talking about, and this is how things need to be." No, when we surrender to Yahweh, we do not dictate the terms of our surrender. We surrender to him wholeheartedly. And as we do that, he will show us what we need to do. We just need to have faith and come to him and follow him. But we need to approach him with faith like a child. You know, if you tell a child you're going to do something, they want to hold you to that word. See? And that's the faith of a child. No, you said we're doing this. When are we doing it? Right? No, you said this was going to happen. When is it happening? That's the faith of a child. Right? You tell them something. Okay, when? Let's do it. We need to have that kind of faith with Yahweh and in the kingdom. Luke 18:15-17. So they were bringing even their babies to Yeshua, so that he might touch them. But when the disciples saw this, they began rebuking them. But Yeshua called for them, saying, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Amen, I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." So again, we need to approach him with childlike faith. We need to be humble, and we just need to honor him in those things and receive from him. Because as we come to him, he's going to instruct us. I mean, yes, we're going to have relationship and just have these good times together. But guess what? When we come to him, he's going to teach us. And we have to be able to receive and hear that teaching. Right? We cannot just come to him and say, "Hey, here's a list of demands of things that you're going to do for me today." No, we come to him and we receive his teaching. We receive his heart given to us. So as they go into the land, and they're not going to see each other all the time, and we know during the week they gathered on Shabbat, right? So what happens the rest of the time? What about the Moedim? When were they supposed to gather together as one people, not just in little families or little communities or things like that? When were they supposed to gather as one people? And we see that again in this week's Parsha, that there are 3 times a year that the men of Israel were supposed to appear before Yahweh. And guess what? When they appear before him, they weren't supposed to leave their families behind. They were supposed to bring the families, and to come and to worship Yahweh. So in this Parsha, we see when you appear before Yahweh, when you come in during the Feast of Ingathering at the end of the year, that's Sukkot. That's the last festival of the of the year that's given. The harvesting after all the other seasons for the year, we have Sukkot. And so at this time, the word of Yahweh was supposed to be read. But it wasn't just read like every year like that. You know, we have readings that we'll do every year. When we come together, we study and we read and we're taught. And yes, absolutely. But in the 7th years, you know, the years of the debts are forgiven, the years of release, right? The Shemitah years. Then every 7th year, they are to come and to hear the entirety of the Torah. Guys, this is like a picture of the wedding feast, okay? As we come during Sukkot, this is a time of, prophetically speaking, of the time of when, after Yeshua returns and after judgment, and we are entering in forever with him. We are entering into eternity, a day where there is no end, right? So we come in and we're doing that. That's like a wedding feast for us. He has received his bride, and we come in and we are now communing with him. And here we are walking in his ways. We are learning his ways. So in the 7th year, then they are to hear the words of this Torah, all the words of the Torah, and all of the people. Not just the men, not just the women, not just the children, and not just Israel. There were others who were gathering in around and together who wanted to know about the God of Israel, who wanted to serve the God of Israel. Well, they need to hear the word too. So we see a lot of this. And guys, the pattern is still the same no matter what. Yahweh calls you out. He redeems you. He sets you free. You know, your debts are released. You're released from this debt that you had. He pays it. He forgives it. Then he gathers us together to hear his word. And so when we do that, we need to hear his word. And why do we need to hear his word? Well, if you ask some people, we hear his word so that we can debate it. But that's not it. We hear his word so we can receive it. We hear his word so that we can learn it, learn to walk in it, and learn to have it change our lives. We hear the word so that we can do it, not so that we can discount it, or not so that we can say, oh, that's for somebody else and some other people. No, if we're his, then we need to hear what his word says. We see this in Deuteronomy 31, verses 12 and 13. It says, gather the people together. And again, who are we talking about? It says the men, the women, the little ones, and the outsider within your town gates. And then we have why? So that they may hear, so that they may learn, so that they will fear Adonai your God, and take care to do all the words of this Torah. So their children who have not known will hear, and learn to fear Adonai your God, all the days you live on the land that you're about to cross over to the Jordan to possess it. See that? You are to gather in together and hear the word of Yahweh so that you can do it, and so that you can be the example for the children and the nations. So we're talking about the Feast of Ingathering. Exodus 23, 15 and 16 says, you will keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread. You shall eat unleavened bread 7 days as I commanded you, in the time appointed in the month of Aviv, for in it you came out from Egypt, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. And the Feast of Harvest, the first fruits of your labors which you have sown in the field, that's Shavuot, and the Feast of the Ingathering, which is in the end of the year, which you have gathered in the labors out of your field. That's Sukkot. So he has these times when people were to come, these 3 times a year, Shalosh Regalim, these 3 times a year, they came to Yerushalayim to worship Yahweh. Exodus 34, 21 and 22 says, 6 days you work, but on the 7th day you shall rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. And you shall observe the Feast of Weeks, the first fruit of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of the Ingathering at the year's end. So even here, Shabbat, you work 6 days. On the 7th day, you cease from your labor, you cease from your work, and it's a time for worship, a time for relationship. But then in these other festivals, we are to assemble and to gather and to worship Yahweh. And we don't see that changing in the book of Acts. In Acts chapter 15, at the Jerusalem Council that's given here, we have a problem. Problem is we have people who are not Jewish, but they want to worship the God of Israel. They know he is the one true Elohim. They want to worship him. They don't know how, but they want to do it. So if you are in the situation, you would probably do what you already know and just switch allegiance, right? Well, Yahweh says you don't do that. You don't worship me the way you worshiped your pagan deities, okay? You worship me differently. So we have to learn how to do that. So we have problems here. We have people who are saying, no, you have to be circumcised and you have to keep the Torah. Those were 2 main issues that were being done. Now, circumcision was the cutting of the flesh, but there's more to it than that. It wasn't just a ritual cutting of the flesh. It was a conversion to Judaism. Then they would circumcise you. Okay, so what we're talking about is, do you have to become Jewish to serve Yahweh? That's what we're really talking about. And then the second thing was to keep the Torah. So what are the issues? So they discuss it, they go through some things, and then James gives an announcement. And so James says, there's my opinion, we should not put obstacles in the way of the nations, those in the nations, the Goyim, the Gentiles, who are turning to God. Instead, we should write them a letter telling them we have 4 things that are listed here. Abstain from things polluted by idols, from fornication, from what is strangled, and from blood. For from the earliest times, Moshe has had in every city those who proclaim him, with his words being read in the synagogue every Shabbat. So what we have here is these 4 things that we start with. It's the issues of clean and unclean, holy, common, fornication, sexual immorality. So some of these things pertaining to issues of kosher. And then the 5th thing is go to the synagogue on Shabbat to hear the Torah taught. So in other words, the rendering of this is you don't have to be Jewish to serve Yahweh, but you do need to keep his word. And to do that, you have to learn what it says. All right? So we have to gather in to hear the word. And that's what we see happening here in Deuteronomy 31. He's telling them, so you're gathering for these festivals, and in the seventh year, you're going to read the entirety of the Torah. Okay, so all Israel is present. This is after the Shemitah, after the year of release. All the debts are forgiven, and they're all gathered in together. The words of the Torah are to be heard by all Israel, and even the outsider that is among them. And they were to hear the words, and in hearing these words, they are to learn to revere Yahweh, learn to honor Yahweh, learn to respect him, to hear his words, so that the next generation can learn what it says, so that they can do it. Okay, because they're not going to do it if they don't know what it says. And if we're not going to do it, then we're going to end up violating it. And we don't want to violate his word, do we? Also, where else do we have Israel receiving instruction upon entering the land? What does that look like? So we go into the land and we gather together to hear the word. Well, we also have a picture in Deuteronomy 27 and 28 where Moshe instructs Israel to gather toward Mount Ebal. We have Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, right? In the land of Shechem. And so they gather in, and they are to proclaim the blessings of the covenant, proclaim the cursings of the covenant. They were to erect stones, cover them with plaster, and write the mitzvot on the stones very clearly so that they could be seen, so that they could be taught. They were to build an altar there and offer burnt and peace offerings given there, and have a ceremony of covenant, and they declare the words of the covenant. They declare the blessings and the curse in the covenant, and all the people were to respond with Amen. So we have here, again, a literal picture of setting before you life and death, blessing and curse, and to say, this is what I'm giving you. I want you to choose life. So we have a picture of that in front of us. Without going into a lot of detail, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, there was Shechem as right in between them, and they're literally right there from each other. They get the same sun, they get the same rain, they get the same wind, it's all the same. However, on Mount Ebal, it's really dirt, rocky, not much grows there. But on Mount Gerizim, there are wells on it, and it's lush, it's green, things grow there. There's vineyards there, so it's quite a different picture. So we literally, as we're standing there at Shechem, the valley of decision, you can look and you can see blessing and curse. Which one do you want? And it's a reminder for us on what we choose. And we do that by having the word written on us, living stones, like Peter says, right? So where else do we see this? How about Exodus 24? It's very similar to what happened on Sinai. The whole nation gathered at the mountain. The Torah, the book of the covenant, was written and read, as well as the stones, as well as the tablets that were there. An altar was built with burnt offerings and with peace offerings given and established, and a covenant ceremony was entered into with blessing and cursing, declarations and oaths. All of this was done, and the people responded and affirmed these things. We see some of this in Exodus 24, verses 3 through 8, where it says, So Moshe came and he told the people all the words of Adonai, as well as all the ordinances, and all the people answered with one voice and said, All the words Adonai has spoken, we will do. So Moshe wrote down the words of Adonai and rose up early in the morning and built an altar below the mountain, along with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent out the young men of Bnei Israel who sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings of oxen to Adonai. And then Moshe took half of the blood and he put it in basins, and the other half he poured out against the altar. And he took the scroll of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, All that Adonai has spoken, we will do and obey. And then Moshe took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, Behold, the blood of the covenant, which Adonai has cut with you in agreement with all of these words. A lot of amazing things that are given here, right? We have pictures of the blessings and the cursings, the sacrifices, the offerings, the worship, all these things going on. So we have a picture of that in Shechem, and we had a picture of that on Mount Sinai. And what we're having here every 7 years in the land is a Sinai experience for the next generation. We're all gathering in together to hear the word of Yahweh and to affirm the covenant within us. We have this so that we know what his word says, so that we can do it, so that we can walk with him, so that we can be a blessing to him and a blessing to each other, so we can walk in community that's affirming one another, helping each other out, glorifying the kingdom. And as we gather in worship, there were songs as well, right? In the tabernacle and in the temple, a lot of the psalms that were sung during times of worship, times of offering, times that where the korbanot were brought. Psalm 40, verse 3 says, He has put a new song in my mouth, even praise unto our God. Many shall see it and fear and trust in Yahweh. So why do we sing? It's not just a pouring out of joy. Yeah, but there's many different reasons why we sing. Here, it says they will hear the song, they will see it and fear and trust Yahweh. That's a kind of reminder of Ha'azinu, Deuteronomy 32, which we'll get to next time. It's talking about a song that's a witness for the people of Israel. When they've done well, it's offering them well. But when they have walked away from Yahweh, then we have the song standing as a testimony against them to call them back to repentance. So ultimately, we need to hear his words so that we can do it. How do we know what the word says if we don't hear it? Right? And that's what we see in Romans 10, 13 to 15. Everyone who calls upon the name of Adonai will be saved. So how then shall they call on the one in whom they have not trusted? And how shall they trust in the one whom they have not heard of? And how shall they hear without someone proclaiming? And how shall they proclaim unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who proclaim good news of good things. So again, how are we to hear the word of Yahweh? Well, we need to gather in together to hear the word of Yahweh. But when we leave there, we're to be talking about it. We're to be saying our experience and the things that have been done for us and what Yahweh's word says to us, all of that. And even in that, even just hearing the word isn't enough. We need to hear the word and act on it. We need to hear the word and do it. And that's what we see over and over again, that it's not just the word that we want, we want the word in action. And that's what we need to act on. Deuteronomy 8, 2 and 3 says, You are to remember all the way Adonai your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness in order to humble you, to test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his mitzvot or not. He afflicted you and let you hunger, then fed you with manna, which neither you nor your fathers had known, in order to make you understand, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Adonai. This is where Yeshua quoted from when he was tempted. It's Matthew 4, verses 3 and 4. And he said, make these stones bread if you're hungry. And Yeshua says, It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. So again, it's not just the word we want to hear. We want to have the word in our hearts in action so that we can live it and do it. Then it's filling us. Then it's fulfilling us, right? Okay, so why hear the voice of Yahweh, and how are they to do this? Why hear his voice? Because it's life. His voice is life to us. He's teaching us his ways. When he gave us his word, he's giving us instructions from his heart, his ways to his people. So if we are his people, we need to be concerned about what he says, right? And as we're doing that, we're learning to walk in his ways. Deuteronomy 4:10 says, The day you stood before Adonai your God in Horeb, Adonai says to me, Gather the people to me, and I will make them hear my words. Again, why and how? So that they will learn to fear me all the days that they live on the earth, and so that they may teach their children. We learn and we reverence him, and then we will teach it to our children. Deuteronomy 5, 23 to 26 says, For who is there of all flesh who has heard the voice of the living God speaking from the midst of the fire as we have lived? You go near and you hear all Adonai our God says, then you tell us what Adonai our God tells you, and we will hear it and do it. Adonai heard the tone of your words when you spoke to me. And Adonai said to me, I have heard the tone of the words that this people have spoken to you. They have done well in what they have spoken. If only there was such a heart in them to fear me, keep all my mitzvot always, so that it might go well with them and with their children forever. When the people heard the voice of Yahweh, they got scared and they backed off. And they said, Moshe, you go find out what Yahweh says and you tell us what he says. They said, we can't stand to hear the voice of Yahweh or we will die. And so this was it. They couldn't bear to hear the voice of Yahweh. So they said, Moshe, you go find out what he says and tell us. And Yahweh's response to that was, okay, I wanted to reveal myself to them. They can't handle that. They're backing off. So that's fine. But you know what? I wish, if I can use that terminology, He says, if only there was a heart within them to fear me, to keep my mitzvot always, so that it would go well with them and their children forever. What he's saying is, I want my children to hear my voice, so that it would be well with them and their children. So that's what he's telling us his word for. So it's for our good and for the good of our children. Deuteronomy 6:1-3 says, now this is the commandment, the statutes, the ordinances that Adonai your God commanded me to teach you to do in the land you are crossing over to possess, so that you might fear Adonai your God, keep all his statutes and mitzvot that I am commanding you and your son and your son's son all the days of your life, so that you may prolong your days. Hear therefore, O Israel, and take care to do this, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Adonai, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Again, we hear his word so that we can take it to heart, so that it is for our good. Deuteronomy 17:18-20, speaking of a king, remember, we know Yahweh says he is our king, but when you go into the land, you're going to reject Yahweh. You're going to want an earthly king. So he says, these are guidelines for you when this happens. If you're going to pick an earthly king, these are the guidelines you have to have concerning that. So when the king sits on the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself a copy of this Torah on a scroll from what is before the Levitical Kohanim. So he is to make a copy of the Torah, not his own Torah. He has to make a copy of the Torah, the ones that the Leviim and the Kohanim use, right? And they are to watch over him as he does this. It will remain with him, and he will read it in all the days of his life, in order to learn to fear Adonai his God and keep all the words of this Torah and these statutes. Then his heart will not be exalted above his brothers, and he will not turn from the commandment to the right or to the left, so that he may prolong his days in his kingship, he and his sons, in the midst of Israel. Again, we hear the word so that we stay humble, so that we are continuing to walk with him and showing his kingdom and learning to work together. If in your reading of the word of Yahweh and in your study, you find yourself becoming angry all the time and prideful and arrogant, there's an issue. And the problem's not the word. The problem's what we're doing with it. Deuteronomy 31:11-13 says, when all Israel comes to appear before Adonai your God in the place he chooses, you are to read this Torah before them in their hearing. Again, we have this. Gather the people. Who? The men, the women, the little ones, the outsider within your town gates, so they may hear, that they will learn and fear Adonai your God, to take care to do all the words of this Torah. So their children who have not known will hear and learn to fear Adonai your God all the days you live in the land that you're about to cross over the Jordan to possess it. Why? Bottom line, John 10:27. My sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. That's why. We gather to hear the word. We study it on our own, but we gather to hear the word and worship together. Why? So that we are counted with the people of Yahweh. We come in, my sheep hear my voice. I know them and they follow me. That's what we're doing. We're learning the word of Yahweh so that we can come before him and just worship him and honor him. And then when we're out in the things we need to do during the week in our daily lives, we're magnifying his name. We're glorifying him in the things that we do. We're giving him honor, and we're talking about them. That's why, like the Shema, and you're to speak about them. When, how, when you get up, when you lie down, when you're on the road, when you're eating breakfast, when you're going, when you're traveling. You're speaking about the word of Yahweh, his goodness, and just the things that he's done for you, and just how he's revealing his word to you. So that's life, and that's blessing, and those are the things that he wants us to walk in, right? So we learn this. Why? For our good and for our children and their children. It's perpetuity. We're learning to pass on a heart for Yahweh, learning to pass on a life living in covenant and a life of blessing, right? And that'll affect not just you and your family, but those who they come in contact with as well. Okay. That's all I have for you today, guys. I hope this has been an encouragement to you. I hope it challenged you a little bit too, and been a blessing as well. And if this has been a blessing to you, then share it. whatever avenue you watch or you listen to these teachings, please share them, help get them out there. And if this has been a blessing to you, then please also consider making a donation to help us continue putting these out there. There's a good amount of cost behind getting these together and putting them out and the things required to do that. And you have allowed us to do that all these years. So if it's been a blessing to you, help us to continue to put them out. Consider making a donation to help us update everything and keep everything moving. All right. Okay, guys. So that's all for today. Until next time, be blessed, be a blessing, and shalom.